She had 11 years of training. He had one question, and by the time he asked it, 200 people in that ballroom would remember exactly where they were standing when the room went silent. The Wardenclyffe ballroom smelled like gardenias and old money that night, the kind of smell that tells you before anyone says a word that the people in this room have never once had to ask what something costs. 200 faces under gold chandeliers, all of them practiced in the particular art of looking effortlessly at ease while being watched by everyone else in the room at the exact same time. Somewhere above the murmur of conversation, a 12-piece orchestra tuned itself into a waltz that nobody was dancing to yet, because the dancing wasn't the point. Not yet. This was the annual Harrow Foundation Gala, the kind of night where a single flower centerpiece cost more than most people's monthly rent, and where every guest in that room understood, without needing to be told out loud, that the real event of the evening wasn't the charity auction printed neatly on the program in front of them. It was each other. If you've ever walked into a room like that, even once, where you could feel everyone quietly measuring everyone else, you already know exactly what I mean. Stay with me, because tonight, that measuring is about to go somewhere nobody in that ballroom expected. Marcus Whitfield stood near the terrace doors, a glass of champagne sweating untouched in his hand, watching the room the way a man watches weather rolling in, waiting to see which direction it was about to turn. "You're doing the thing again," said Cecilia Marsh, gliding up beside him in a deep green gown that matched the foundation's logo a little too deliberately to be an accident. She ran the Harrow Foundation's board and had known Marcus since business school, and she stood beside him now the way an old friend stands guard at a party they didn't ask to be guarding. "I'm observing," Marcus said. "You're always observing. It's unsettling at parties, Marcus. People like to be looked at, not studied." He almost smiled. Almost. Across the room, his fiancée, Vanessa Kingsley, held court near the auction stage, laughing at something a senator's wife had just said to her. Her diamond earrings caught the light every single time she tilted her head, which she did often, because she had learned a long time ago that a beautiful woman tilting her head at exactly the right moment could make an entire room feel like it was in on a secret with her. Vanessa was not cruel by nature. She had simply never once been told no often enough in her life for it to leave any kind of mark on her. "She's radiant tonight," Cecilia offered, watching Marcus's face closely for a reaction he didn't give her. "She's always radiant," he said. "That's never been the question." Cecilia opened her mouth to ask what the actual question was, then she thought better of it. Marcus Whitfield had built and sold 2 companies before he turned 35, and in all that time the people around him had learned that when he went quiet like this, it meant he was already 3 moves ahead of whatever was happening in the room. Nobody rushed him, they just waited to see where the silence was going to land. Near the service corridor, half hidden behind a column dressed in white orchids, a woman in a black catering uniform folded linen napkins into perfect triangles with hands that moved like she had done it 10,000 times before. Because she had. Her name was Denise Carter, and she had worked catering events for the Harrow Foundation for 3 years, ever since she'd arrived in the city with a duffel bag, a scholarship she never got the chance to use, and a pair of dance shoes so worn the satin had faded to the colour of weak tea. She kept those shoes in her locker at the catering company, wrapped carefully in plastic, though she hadn't danced in them, not really danced, in over 2 years. Sometimes on her breaks, she would touch the ribbon laces just to remind herself of something. She was never entirely sure what. Discipline, maybe, or the version of herself that used to believe a stage was still possible for someone like her. If you've ever kept something in a drawer Just because letting it go felt too much like giving up on a version of yourself, you already know exactly what those shoes meant to her. Don't go anywhere, because those shoes are about to matter more than anyone in that ballroom could have guessed. 2 minutes to auction, her supervisor said, passing behind her with a clipboard in hand. And smile. Rich people tip better when the help looks happy. Denise smiled. Not for the tip. Because smiling cost her nothing, and she had learned a long time ago to spend as little of herself as possible in rooms that weren't built for her. The auction opened with the usual theatre, a diamond bracelet, a week in Positano, a private dinner cooked by a chef whose name got a ripple of applause just for being said out loud. Bidding paddles rose and fell like a tide nobody was controlling. Vanessa won the Positano trip for a number that made a woman 2 tables over choke audibly on her wine, and she accepted the applause with the ease of someone catching a ball she already knew was coming her way. It was during the lull after the 4th item, a signed cello that nobody in that room actually played, that Priscilla Danes leaned toward Vanessa with the particular gleam of a woman who has just thought of something she believes is clever. "You should do the dance challenge," Priscilla said. "For the foundation. Everyone's doing it online right now. You put up money, someone has to match your steps, loser donates. It's practically a philanthropic trend at this point." Vanessa's eyes lit up, delighted by the shape of an idea that let her be generous and entertaining in the exact same breath. "That's actually brilliant, Pris. You'd need a partner," Priscilla said, scanning the room with the casual cruelty of someone who has never once had to think about who gets picked last for anything in her entire life. Her gaze landed on the champagne station. What about her? Vanessa followed the look and found Denise mid-pour, completely unaware that she had just become the subject of something. "The waitress," Vanessa said, laughing. Not meanly, exactly. More the laugh of someone who has never once imagined herself in another person's shoes and therefore doesn't recognize the cliff edge she is standing right on the lip of. "Oh, that's perfect. Marcus, come here. You have to hear this." Marcus crossed the room at the sound of his own name, arriving in time to hear the shape of the plan, but not yet its target. "I'm going to do a dance challenge for the foundation," Vanessa announced, already glowing with the anticipation of applause that hadn't even happened yet. $7,000 on the line. Whoever can't keep up with me on the floor, their side donates. I'm going to ask the girl at the champagne table. Marcus's face did not move, which, for the people who knew him best, was the loudest possible reaction he could have given. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "are you sure that's—" "It'll be fun," she said, already turning away, already halfway to the microphone in her mind. "It's for a good cause." He did not stop her. Later, several people in that ballroom would wonder why. Whether it was hesitation or permission or something else entirely that they didn't yet have the vocabulary for. What none of them knew yet was that Marcus had spent the last 20 minutes of the evening watching the woman at the champagne station move, the economy in her steps, the way she pivoted around a service cart without spilling a single drop, the particular carriage of someone whose spine still remembered a discipline her job no longer required of her. He had already started asking himself a question. He simply wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. If you're the kind of woman who notices things other people walk right past, the posture, the small tell, the thing nobody else in the room catches, drop a comment below and let me know, because you and Marcus would have gotten along just fine. The microphone crackled to life, and the room's attention swiveled toward the stage the way a field of flowers turns toward light. "Good evening, everyone," Vanessa said, her voice carrying easily, trained by a decade of galas exactly like this one. "I have a fun addition to tonight's fundraising. if the foundation will indulge me." A ripple of amused encouragement moved through the crowd. Cecilia, sensing something she couldn't yet name, glanced toward Marcus, who had gone very still near the terrace doors. "I'd like to challenge someone to a dance-off," Vanessa continued, smiling the smile that had gotten her onto magazine covers before she'd even turned 25. $7,000 to the foundation if I win. If she wins, well, she won't, but if she does, I'll match it." Laughter, warm and easy. The laughter of people who had already assumed the outcome before it even happened. "I choose," Vanessa said, turning, pointing with a manicured finger toward the champagne station. Her. Every single head in that ballroom turned at once. Denise stood very still, a bottle of champagne suspended mid-pour, suddenly aware of 200 sets of eyes landing on her all at once, like weather changing without warning. "Me?" she said, and her voice, though quiet, carried in the sudden hush, the way a single dropped glass carries in an empty hall. "Come on," Vanessa said, laughing, waving her forward with the easy confidence of someone who has never once had to wonder whether a room was laughing with her or getting ready to laugh at someone else entirely. "It'll be fun, for charity." Somewhere near the back, Priscilla Danes had already started recording on her phone. Denise set the champagne bottle down with the same careful precision she used for everything in her life, buying herself 3 seconds to decide what kind of woman she was about to be in front of a room that had already decided for her. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said. "Oh, don't be shy," Vanessa said, crossing the floor toward her, gown trailing behind her like a comet. "I promise I won't embarrass you. Much." A ripple of laughter. Not quite unkind, exactly. Not quite kind either. "It's not shyness," Denise said. Her voice had steadied. "I'm working. I'll clear it with your supervisor." Vanessa was already snapping her fingers toward the catering manager, who appeared within seconds, nodding vigorously, because a woman like Vanessa Kingsley did not get told no by anyone whose paycheck touched the Harrow Foundation's budget in any way. "See? Handled. $7,000. One dance. You'd be doing the foundation a favor." 200 faces waited. Somewhere in the crowd, Marcus had not moved, had not spoken, was watching Denise's face with an intensity that Cecilia, standing close enough to notice, would later describe as a man watching to see if a bridge was going to hold weight. Denise looked at the small crowd of faces glowing with anticipation, looked at the orchestra conductor glancing uncertainly toward the stage for cues nobody had given him yet, and made a decision that had less to do with courage than it did with arithmetic. $7,000 was $7,000, and this foundation funded scholarships for girls exactly like the one she used to be, a long time ago, before everything changed. "Fine," she said, untying her apron. "One song." If you've ever had to swallow your pride because the number on the table mattered more than your comfort in that exact moment, you already know this wasn't weakness. That was strategy. That was a woman doing math in her head while everyone else in the room thought she was simply deciding whether or not to be embarrassed. A ripple of applause moved through the crowd, already treating the outcome as settled entertainment rather than a contest with a real person standing on either side of it. The conductor, after a whispered consultation with the first violin, chose something with a driving Latin rhythm, bright horns, insistent percussion, the kind of piece built for showing off rather than subtlety. Vanessa kicked off her heels with theatrical flourish to more laughter and took the center of the floor like she had been born standing in it. She was, credit where it's due, genuinely good. Years of private instruction had given her clean lines and confident hips, and she moved through the first 16 bars with the polish of someone who had never once doubted that a room would applaud her. Denise stepped out of her flats. She did not have the real shoes. Those were folded in plastic, sitting in a locker clear across town. She danced barefoot on cold marble, and for the first 8 bars, she looked exactly like what the room expected. Careful, tentative. A woman doing her best in shoes she never chose for this moment. Then something in her spine remembered itself. It happened so quietly that only a few people in that room caught the exact second it happened. Cecilia did. So did the orchestra's lead violinist, who nearly missed her next entrance because her bow arm simply forgot to move. Denise's shoulders dropped half an inch. Her chin lifted. Her hips found the rhythm, not by following Vanessa's lead, but by locating the actual pulse buried underneath the horns, the one a classically trained dancer hears before anyone else in the room ever does. She turned. It was a small thing, technically speaking, a simple pivot turn, nothing acrobatic about it at all, but it was executed with a precision that made the difference between a woman simply dancing and a woman who had once been trained by someone who charged real money to teach exactly that kind of turn and nothing less. The laughter in the room did not stop. It changed pitch. Vanessa, sensing the shift the way performers always sense when a room's attention has quietly moved somewhere else, raised her own difficulty. A series of quick turns, arms lifted high, a flourish clearly designed to remind everyone in that room who had actually issued this challenge in the first place. Denise matched it. Not aggressively, not competitively, she simply moved the way her body had been trained to move for 11 straight years, before her scholarship money ran out, along with everything else in her life at the time. And the room, which had gathered to watch a joke unfold, found itself instead watching something it did not yet have a name for. "She's actually good," someone murmured near the bar. "She's better than good," said the violinist under her breath, still playing, eyes wide. By the second chorus, when Vanessa executed a fast spin she'd clearly practiced for exactly this kind of moment, Denise mirrored it a full beat later, cleaner, quieter, without the flourish of a hand thrown up for applause, simply the movement itself, complete and correct in a way that needed no audience to validate it. The laughter had gone entirely by now. In its place sat something far more uncomfortable, 200 people beginning to understand, in real time, that they had gathered to watch someone be humiliated, and were instead watching someone be revealed for exactly who she was. If you're still here with me, you already feel it too, don't you? This is the exact moment the room realizes they picked the wrong person to underestimate tonight. Keep watching, because what happens in the next 60 seconds is the reason people are still sharing this story. Vanessa felt it too. It moved across her face in stages. First confusion, because the script she had walked onto that floor with no longer matched what was actually happening in front of her. Then a flicker of something sharper, because being matched, for a woman who had never once in her adult life been matched at anything in public, did not feel like fun anymore. She pushed harder, a final combination, fast, technically demanding, the kind of sequence meant to end things decisively, once and for all. Denise executed it half a second later, and where Vanessa's version ended in a flourish, thrown toward the crowd, Denise's ended simply, arms coming to rest, chin level, breath controlled, the expression of someone who had learned a long time ago never to perform triumph, because triumph for a woman like her had always been far more dangerous than defeat ever was. The orchestra held the final note a beat longer than written, as if even the musicians themselves weren't entirely sure the song was allowed to be over yet. Silence. Real silence. The kind ballrooms rarely produce. 200 people uncertain whether to applaud a maid who had just outdanced their host's fiancée, in a game designed, without anyone in that room quite admitting it out loud, to prove the exact opposite outcome. Vanessa broke the silence first, laughing too brightly, the laugh of someone reaching for a rope that simply wasn't there anymore. "Well," she said, she's got some moves, doesn't she?" A few scattered claps followed, uncertain. The kind of applause that exists only to fill a silence rather than to honour anything real that just happened. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" Priscilla asked, phone still raised, her tone somewhere between admiration and suspicion, as though quality in the wrong hands required some kind of explanation. Denise reached for her flats, sliding them back on with the same careful economy she brought to everything in her life. "I used to study," she said simply, "a long time ago." "Study where?" Priscilla pressed. "Does it matter?" Denise said, not sharply. "Just tired. The particular tiredness of someone who has spent an entire evening being asked to prove she belonged somewhere she had never once claimed to belong in the first place." It was then that Marcus crossed the floor. He had not moved for the entire dance. He moved now with the unhurried certainty of a man who had already decided something and was simply walking toward the moment where he would finally say it out loud. The room noticed him the way rooms always notice weather changing. Vanessa turned toward him, already composing her face into the version of triumph she had wanted this dance to produce for her. "Marcus, wasn't that—" He didn't look at her. He was looking at Denise. "Where?" he said, and his voice, quiet as it was, filled the ballroom the way quiet voices do when everyone has been waiting all evening for a man to finally speak. "Did you learn to dance like that?" It was not the question Vanessa expected. It was not really a question anyone in that room expected, because on its surface it seemed to simply repeat what Priscilla had already asked minutes earlier. But something in the way Marcus asked it, the stillness underneath it, the sense that he already half knew the answer and needed only to hear it confirmed out loud, made the entire ballroom go quiet in a completely different way than before. Denise hesitated. "The Ardsley Conservatory," she said finally. "I trained there for 11 years. I had a scholarship through my senior year." A pause. "It ended when the program lost its funding. I never got to finish." Marcus nodded slowly, as if a puzzle piece he had been holding on to for the better part of an hour had finally clicked into place. "The Ardsley Conservatory," he repeated, "run out of the old Whitfield Arts Building on Grant Street." "Yes," Denise said, surprised he knew it at all. "My mother built that program," Marcus said, "before she passed. It lost its funding 6 years ago when the foundation managing it collapsed after a fraud investigation. I've spent every gala since trying to figure out how to rebuild it without it looking like some kind of publicity stunt." He looked at her directly now, and the whole room seemed to lean in an inch, holding its breath without quite realizing it. "I watched you dance tonight, and I thought I recognized the training in you before I recognized anything else about you at all. I wasn't sure until you said the name out loud." Vanessa's face had gone through several expressions in the space of 10 seconds, none of them comfortable to wear in front of 200 people. "You knew," she said slowly to Marcus, "and you didn't say anything." "I wasn't certain," Marcus said, "and I wanted to see what would happen if I waited." He turned finally to face the room fully, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the particular weight of a man who rarely used more words than necessary, and was therefore always listened to closely when he chose to use them. "I've been quiet most of tonight because I've spent the last year trying to decide whether rebuilding my mother's program was something I could do quietly, without turning it into exactly this kind of spectacle. I think I just got my answer tonight. And it's not the one I expected to get. He turned to Denise. I'm not going to make this a bigger scene than it already is. I think you've had enough of a scene made out of you tonight already. But I'd like to fund your final year at Ardsley, wherever it operates now, if the offer means anything to you at all. Not tonight, not in front of everyone, but I wanted to say it while the truth was still standing in this room, instead of the assumption that brought us here. If a moment like that has ever happened for you, where someone finally saw the thing you'd been quietly carrying for years, I want you to tell us about it in the comments below. This community has some of the most beautiful stories, and every single one of us reads them. Denise did not cry, though several people near her did. She simply nodded once, the way a person nods when they have spent a long time not letting themselves hope for something, and are being asked, gently, to start hoping again. Vanessa stood very still in the middle of the dance floor. $7,000 and an audience she had once controlled completely, now arranged around a truth she hadn't authored and couldn't perform her way out of, no matter how hard she tried. I didn't know, she said quietly, to no one in particular, or maybe to everyone in that room at once. I just thought, she stopped, started again. I thought it would be funny. It might have been, Cecilia said gently, coming to stand beside her, if she'd had anything to prove, and lost. She didn't lose. Vanessa looked at Denise for a long moment, really looked. The way she perhaps hadn't looked at anyone serving her drinks or clearing her plates in a very long time, and something in her face softened into something closer to shame than performance ever could be. I'm sorry, she said, and for the first time all evening there was no audience calculation left in her voice at all. That wasn't fair, any of it. Denise considered her for a moment, then nodded. Thank you, she said simply. It was not forgiveness, exactly, not yet, but it was a door left open for it, which was, perhaps, more honest than forgiveness offered too quickly would have ever been. The orchestra, unsure what else to do, began to play again, softer this time, and the room slowly exhaled back into its ordinary conversations, though something in the air had shifted permanently, the way a room feels different after a window has been opened, even long after it's been closed again. Later, much later, when the gala had wound down and the wait staff had begun clearing the linens from the tables, Denise found her worn dance shoes waiting in her bag, exactly where she had left them that morning, small, tea-coloured, ribbon laces frayed at the ends from years of tying and untying, before performances that had, for a long time, felt like they belonged to a version of her life that had already ended long ago. She held them for a moment, before packing them away, and understood, for the first time in longer than she could easily say, that they were not a relic of something lost. They were proof of something that had simply been waiting for the right room to finally recognize it. Here's what this whole story is really about. Once you strip away the ballroom, and the money, and the $7,000 sitting on that table, dignity was never about being seen. It was about remaining whole in the moments when nobody was looking, so that when someone finally did look, there was still something true left there to find. The lesson of that night spread quietly, the way real lessons tend to. No headline, no hashtag, just the slow understanding among everyone who was there that the measure of a person is rarely found in the rooms built to flatter them. It's found in the ones built, however carelessly, to test them instead. And that quiet discipline, carried faithfully through years that nobody applauds, has a way of outlasting every single spotlight built to diminish it. Vanessa spent the following weeks reconsidering not just that night, but the ease with which she had always assumed a room's laughter was harmless simply because it belonged to her to command. Marcus spent the following year quietly rebuilding what his mother had started, careful never to let the story become about himself in any way. And Denise returned, eventually, to a stage. Not because a billionaire had rescued her, but because she had never actually stopped being the woman who belonged there in the first place. He had simply been the first person in that entire room willing to ask the question everyone else had been too comfortable to even consider. Let me ask you something before you go. If you were standing in that ballroom tonight, would you have laughed with the crowd, or would you have been the one person who noticed what everyone else missed? Tell me in the comments, because I genuinely want to know. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us putting it together, do us a favor right now. Give this video a like, so more people who need to hear this story actually find it. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that dignity outlasts every room built to test it. And subscribe if you want more stories exactly like this one, because we post new ones every single week, and this community is one of the kindest, most thoughtful audiences we have ever had the privilege of writing for. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. We will see you in the next one.